Morning, everyone. It is the morning after the big Trudeau announcement that the TransMountain pipeline will begin construction this summer. Fingers crossed. We've heard this before. But yes, and we're celebrating with a BC Poly hot stove where we're going to break down what this means to all the big political players. I'm Jordan Bateman. I'm the Vice President of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, joined as always by...
I am Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Mighty Orca, live from the legislature in beautiful and sunny Victoria.
Yes, Maclean, big news yesterday. It took a long time. That cabinet meeting went on and on and on. Cabinet ministers missing, all the key cabinet ministers missing question period yesterday. The prime minister wasn't there, sort of anticlimactic question period. And then finally, I think about 1:30 our time or 2 o'clock our time, we got the news. Federal cabinet has reapproved the TransMountain pipeline. This, of course, after they lost a court case, or the court stipulated that they need to reconsult with various Indigenous groups. The Trudeau government now feels like they've checked that box, and off we go.
Well, I mean, you've explained sort of the reason why. If you feel like you've seen this movie before, you have. This isn't the first time Ottawa has approved the expanded pipeline, but this time, you're right. This time does feel like they have done a more thorough job of checking all the necessary boxes. And the Prime Minister said construction starts this year.
Yeah, so I mean, we're a construction association at ICBA. We will have a few thousand members of ours working on this pipeline. There's 7 different spreads, and ICBA affiliated companies have contracts on 5 of them. But you know, I hope he's right. But Maclean, I feel a little bit like, and this is a reference, you're far too young for this reference, you're not old like me, but I feel a little bit like Charlie Brown trying to kick that proverbial football, and you know, we've been here before, and we've wound up to kick the winning field goal, and something has snatched the ball away at the last second. So, you know, I was watching the media coverage this morning, and I couldn't help but notice that, you know, the other side, this very small group of vocal protesters, some of whom are have organizations funded by U.S. interests, but whatever, they are still rabidly opposed. And those of us in favor, the ones who are have been working so hard to get this file through, the words that describe us are relieved, grateful, like, slightly encouraged. Like, it's, don't mistake our passion for this project. It's just that, we feel like we've been in this movie, 7 or 8 times already.
Well, yeah, exactly. And if you are in favor of this project, yesterday's announcement is not the touchdown, if you like, but sort of the first down. You get to keep playing. So you know what I mean? It's there's been quite a few people in Alberta and here in BC and across the country saying, this is good news, but we're not going to celebrate yet. It hasn't started yet. And the same people who said they will stop at nothing to stop this project said that again yesterday.
Yeah, so now they're running out of options. Legally, TransMountain has won 18 of the 19 cases. The 19th was one that was fulfilled yesterday. They had a Supreme Court justice, former Supreme Court justice, guiding the process of consultation. So, we think that they've, checked all the boxes there. But, this I gotta be a little careful, but like, there's no accounting for crazy, right? So I think we're gonna have people chaining themselves to stuff and trying to create as many headaches as possible. We only hope that like protest if you want, but do it safely and make sure you realize that we are a democratic country. 60% of Canadians now support this pipeline. That's up from 35 when we first started the process. We flipped a government. The Trudeau government ran against this pipeline. Once we gave them all the facts and they understood the full importance of this pipeline, they flipped to support it.
To their credit.
To their credit, and we've done a lot. We've done a lot of work on this file. We've, First Nations. Originally, all the First Nations are opposed to it. Well, now you have deals with dozens of First Nations, 400 First Nation chiefs across the country support this project. You see, actually, 3 Indigenous groups, vying to buy a portion or all of this project. Like, we've checked every box. Like, we've done everything we can, but you still have this small vocal minority, and it's not about this pipeline, it's about every pipeline, every oil and gas project. And I do wonder, when does their act wear thin with the public?
I think it started to already. I mean, as you mentioned, public opinion has shifted on this, and I think that's been in large part because of some revulsion towards some of the never-ending protests and a lot of the conflicting messaging coming from the no side as well. I mean, there was a lot of discussion the last few months, and indeed again yesterday, that there is. I mean, you'll tell me if this sounds familiar. There is no business case for this pipeline, and yet the extra oil that will flow through this pipeline will, bring about the end of the world. Those things cannot both be true. And yet people were saying them literally in the same tweet, in the same, 200 characters. We're going to talk about some of the people that are affected by this announcement yesterday, but Elizabeth May said that yesterday in one tweet. There is no business case, and the oil it's going to bring about the end of the world. Those things are contradictory.
Yeah, no, exactly.
There's no business case. Then if you're worried about the oil, you can rest easy, and you can probably laugh at the Trudeau government for wasting billions of dollars on a pipeline that will apparently be empty.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. There's this idea that no revenue will be created for government from it, and yet the National Energy Board stipulates precisely how much money pipeline providers can make. Literally, Adam Sterling makes this point. Literally, by law, this pipeline must make money for its owner. Like, it's enshrined in law. So what do you mean there's going to be no revenue?
Yeah, you mentioned Adam Sterling. I was going to mention him because he has done a phenomenal job sort of debunking some of these. And again, he's not saying it's wrong to be opposed to this project. It is a perfectly valid opinion. What he is saying is be honest. And if you are opposed to oil because you're opposed to oil, that's fine. But don't say there's no business case, because that's just demonstrably not true. Another good person to follow on Twitter and a sometime Orca contributor is Blair King, making a lot of the same points, fact-based, numbers-based, math-based, all the stuff that I can't do. But also staying respectful while he does it. Yeah,
no, exactly. Blair King, Adam Sterling. I wish ICBA had awards we could give, because I'd give one to both those guys, because they've just been so fair on this thing and so level-headed and just patiently answering all of these crazy claims. I see Sephora Berman actually blocked Adam Sterling because he had the audacity to call her out on this idea. Berman, who works for Stand.Earth, which is a major U.S. NGO that dabbles in interfering in Canadian democracy and economies, and she came out and said absolutely no oil is going to Asia now from Canada, and that proves there's no market. And yet, there's a super tanker off the coast of Galveston filled with 1 million barrels or 1 million liters or whatever of Canadian oil headed towards China. And Adam had the audacity to actually point that out to Sephora, who then quickly banned him, blocked him, because we can't have facts get in the way of a good advocacy argument.
Well, I mean, that's exactly it. And the thing is that it's not like Stand.Earth or the Sierra Club or the Green Party even need to get into whether or not there's a business case. They can make a moral case if they like against expanding the pipeline. That's fine. At least it's consistent. You and I would disagree with it, but I mean, at the very least, you can respect the fact that that's just the stand they're taking, and fair enough. But they're not. That's not what's happened here. They've gone and they've tried to have it both ways. They've tried to make what they think is a moral case against oil, while also making a completely, I'm going to be charitable and use the word flimsy when I really mean false, economic case against it.
You know what? What's funny, Maclean, is I don't think they can make a moral case against it, because I think they know there's not enough public support to make that moral case.
Yeah.
So while I was waiting,
by moral, I don't mean morally superior. I just mean sort of that's the kind of appeal they're making. Do you know what I mean? Exactly. Like, it's not a fact base. It's just we think oil is wrong. At least it would be consistent. I'm not saying it's a good argument.
No, exactly. But I think that sliver is so small that they can't possibly stick to it, because yesterday, waiting for this announcement, I had CBC News rolled on all day, and they're doing a climate change series on CBC News World, and you can bet which side they're going to come down on every single part of that argument. But the interesting thing is they put out a poll, and Eric Grenier, who I have a lot of respect for, was on there explaining this poll. And essentially, the poll's findings were that 90% or something of Canadians would not even be willing to pay as much as they pay for their Netflix subscription every month to fight climate change. Everyone's like, yeah, okay, sure, it's an issue, but I don't want to pay $7.95 a month to do anything about it. I'd rather use that money to watch Jessica Jones season 3.
I would have chosen a different example.
That's the one I'm watching right now. So there you go.
Fair enough.
All right.
You know, I mean, we've seen this happen time and time again with every issue. From, do you think that government should expand healthcare? Well, of course I do. Do you want your taxes to go up to pay for it? No, of course I don't. I mean, like this is not an uncommon phenomenon. This is not unique.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Okay, let's take it politician by politician. Let's start federally. So what does this announcement today mean for Justin Trudeau as he heads into the October election? That, the last half of his speech yesterday went from, laying out reasons, like sounding like a prime minister, to sounding like a candidate. He was attacking the Conservative government, attacking Stephen Harper. Very disconcerting to see the Prime Minister of Canada on a day where he was announcing he was going to spend $10 billion tax dollars, standing in a press theater that's supposed to be nonpartisan in front of the Canadian flag, ripping the Conservatives who aren't even in power on this particular file.
Well, I mean, it would not be the first time that the Prime Minister has said one thing and then gone a different way. But so he's comfortable with that. And I mean, we kind of touched on this off the top, is that I think that he and his party have come around on this issue, I think largely because the public has. And so, they've kind of followed public opinion on this. As we've pointed out here before, a majority of British Columbians support this pipeline project. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a very slim majority of Quebecers are even in favor of it. So, I mean, there's a lot of people saying, well, this is going to sink the Prime Minister and he's going to get killed. Well, he might lose a seat or two in Vancouver. That is absolutely true. But I don't see how this is a politically bad move for him outside of, Jody Wilson-Raybould's seat, which he doesn't have anyway, and a few others like that. It's not like the Prime Minister and the Liberals were going to do well in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan, and I'm not saying they will, but I don't think that this is like the kryptonite issue that a lot of people on the far left side of our political spectrum are saying it is.
Yeah, I look at it like this. So he has a choice. Either, whichever way he goes, he's going to be splitting that vote with someone, right? So if he disapproves of the project and the polls are right and 40% of Lower Mainlanders don't support the pipeline, well, then he's sharing that 40% with the Greens and the NDP. If he looks to the 60% who do support the pipeline, well, he's fighting for that vote with the Conservatives. So at least he's getting 50, if it all split evenly, 50% of a larger pie makes a lot more sense than the smaller one. And I look at, Hetty Fry, I think it had made some noise that she might be in trouble. But like Hetty Fry is like 1,000 terms, won it in a landslide. Like she's got votes to burn there in her particular riding. Jody Wilson-Raybould's riding is a mess for a totally different reason, completely caused by the Prime Minister. So, there's... What does it mean for like John Aldag in Surrey? I think the Trudeau wave was receding anyways, with or without this decision. I don't think John Aldag is going to hold that seat. What about Jonathan Wilkinson on the North Shore, Carla Quattro? Like, even they're in danger. But it's more about the Canadians falling out of love with the myth that was Justin Trudeau.
Well, and if you're a Liberal Party strategist and you say that you're going to make you have to make a decision on this. You can't do nothing. So you're either going to pull slightly to the right or slightly to the left and leave whatever side you pull. You're going to expose a flank. If I'm a Liberal strategist, I am much more comfortable exposing a flank to the likes of Jagmeet Singh and Elizabeth May. Sure. We're going to talk about Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh, but I mean, the NDP are probably federally going through the worst period in their history, I would argue. And Elizabeth May and the Green Party, people are talking about a green surge, but we're talking about 2 MPs and, 10% or so support. So, I mean, the person to worry about, if you're Justin Trudeau, is Andrew Scheer. It's not Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh as of right now. Yeah. And so I think that strategically this was the right move.
Yeah, for sure. I think this cake was baked the day they bought it. He couldn't back down after they bought the pipeline. It's just be billions thrown away, and you can't go into an election on that. So we move from him to Andrew Scheer. Scheer is going to announce his climate plan today. Maybe it's already happened. I have not seen it. Apologies for that if it's already out. But for Scheer, here's my sense on this. If you are rabidly pro-pipeline, you're probably voting for Andrew Scheer over Justin Trudeau anyways. I don't think anything Trudeau has done in the past 3.5 years on this file is going to inspire much confidence if you're for the oil and gas industry.
I agree. I don't think this moves a lot of votes between Scheer and Trudeau. There are, for the large number of Canadians that will either vote Conservative or Liberal, depending on circumstances and where they live in the country and who's in charge. There's probably a few who might have been inclined to vote Conservative who might now feel slightly more comfortable voting for the Liberals, but I don't think we're talking about a large number of people. And I think you're right. I think that in terms of Andrew Scheer, today's kind of a net neutral day, or yesterday rather.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go to, actually, they're in third place in the latest polls. The Green Party have slipped ahead of the NDP. If you're the Fed Libs, you're really concerned. You might lose every riding on Vancouver Island to these guys. Elizabeth May, she was pretty upset with her generally usual buddy, Justin Trudeau.
If you're the Greens, this is a good day because it gives you an issue to rally around, and it's an issue that people who are opposed to the pipeline, I think, are more likely to be inclined to listen to Elizabeth May than the NDP. So, I mean, yeah, there are probably some spots that she might consider, and when I say some spots, I'm talking about a handful of seats at most in places like downtown Vancouver and Vancouver Island. But I mean, so yes, I think for Elizabeth May, obviously, she would say that yesterday was a bad day, but I think politically for her, it was actually probably not the worst day. It gives her a cause, an identifiably Green cause that she can talk about through the election campaign.
Yeah, and she can fundraise it for sure. Jagmeet Singh. Brad Zubik said it best on Twitter watching Jagmeet Singh's press conference on this. He's like, I never understood why Elizabeth May was in third place until I just saw Jagmeet. Jagmeet is about to Jagmeet his maker, I think. It's not going well for the great man.
No, it's not going well for him, but this is a trend that started before him. The NDP federally, and you see some echoes of this provincially here too, made a decision, conscious or not, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, to try and be sort of the downtown anti-development party. When that space was already kind of mostly occupied by the Greens. They wanted to sort of co-opt it and also be the big labor, big project, blue-collar party. But the problem is on issues like TransMountain, you cannot be both. Yeah. And the NDP have kind of made their bed, and unfortunately, I'm going to mix metaphors here. They've made their bed, but the Greens are eating their lunch.
Yes.
And to compound this, and a very Jagmeet Singh thing to do, unfortunately, is he spent yesterday also bragging about his burgeoning friendship with Jeremy Corbyn. The leader of the Labour Party in the UK, who is, let's just put it this way, if you're looking to entice left-leaning Canadians who are feeling nervous about voting for the NDP and are more likely to vote for Justin or Greens, I don't think touting your friendship with Jeremy Corbyn is the way to go.
No, I can't believe that he'd be that excited about Jeremy Corbyn. There's like 1,000 people running for the Democratic nomination in the States. Pick out a few of them and hang out with them. You'd probably... see, well, look, you're not going to see a boost anyways. Sven Robinson really ripping this decision. This is a chance for Jagmeet and Sven to kind of agree on something, which has not always happened up till now. But you're right. Look, the NDP is torn, right? They have big support in the public sector unions, but public sector unions have kind of given themselves over to very liberal causes. Who are, and organizers who are trying to, fight oil and gas and what's it called? Not divestment. What do they call? Divestiture or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Divestiture. So, they're trying to get rid of oil and gas stocks. Meanwhile, they also are trying to keep the blue collar guys who are actually going to build this thing. 2 of the 7 spreads go to the building trades unions. They're trying to keep them in the boat. So, yeah, they're a real mess on this file for sure. And, yeah, you can see, like Zubik said, you can see why the Greens are eating their lunch. Okay, is that it for the federal people? I think so. So I'm going to talk about Premier Horgan. What does it mean for him? The last great pipeline fighter. Every tool in his little toolbox, he's going to use it. John Horgan, is it just symbolic now, or is there anything he can do?
I mean, honestly, nothing. I mean, even George Heyman, who is, I think, much more zealous on this file than is Horgan, and that's just my personal opinion.
He was the executive director of the Sierra Club.
Yeah, exactly. And he's the environment minister now. It was emphasizing yesterday that this was a federal decision and it was entirely within their jurisdiction. And they're disappointed, and that's fine. They can disagree. But they both he and the premier sort of it would almost felt like concession speeches. Like, this issue is, we're disappointed, but we're gonna try. They're keeping out a faint hope, but this felt very much like them just accepting the inevitable.
Yeah, and yet, they're still fighting the turn off the taps legislation in court. They're still fighting, they're still planning to go forward to the Supreme Court of Canada with their crazy lawsuit that, got thrown out 5-0. So I guess they're still trying. What's going to be dangerous, though, is they're going to continue to send signals to the protest movement and blind eye to their antics. That, I think, is probably what's dangerous, because honestly, someone's going to get hurt out there in the woods somewhere if people are doing foolish things on construction sites.
Yeah, and let's hope that cooler heads prevail.
Yeah, and I hope that these guys like the Mike Udemas of the world and the Sephora Bermans of the world, protest is fine, but make sure your guys are doing it safely, because anything can happen out there. And I'm not talking about in interactions with construction workers. I'm talking about construction sites are dangerous. You go through all this safety training for a reason. Like, be careful what you're chaining yourself to, or what you're trying to, and for God forbid, no sabotage and things like that would put real lives at risk.
Well, we can certainly, let's all, I think everyone can agree that we should definitely avoid that. And then I agree with you completely. There's nothing wrong with peaceful protests, and that is a fundamental part of our system here. And I think we all respect that, but yet there's literally a line that should not be crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's that for them. Andrew Wilkinson, I did see him in the news cycles, so that's always good. When you're the opposition leader, you need to be in the news cycles. Obviously supportive of the pipeline. He must be sitting there going, okay, if 60% of British Columbians support this pipeline, and whatever percentage of them, this is their a key mobilization issue, he has that field to himself in British Columbia.
Yeah, and if I'm when we talked about the split in the BC NDP coalition, if I'm Andrew Wilkinson, I start making calls to some of these unions and labor organizations who have always traditionally supported the NDP and who are probably likely to continue supporting the NDP, but on this issue they're probably a little on the annoyed side, and say, you know what, we want you to be busy. We want you to be building things. I'm not suggesting this is a viable long-term strategy, because we all know where they're going to land eventually. But on this issue, there does seem to be a bit of a division.
Yeah, I think you should reach out to the workers. Skip the ideologues running these unions. It's hopeless with them. Tom Sigurdsson hasn't opened his mouth about this project, even though 2 of the 7 spreads are going to be built by building trades union workers. He dare not mention anything, because John Horgan may take away his union monopoly, which is really the only thing propping up those unions financially at this point. So, there's that's like Game of Thrones level kind of political intrigue going on there in the trade union camp. But Wilkinson should be looking construction workers in the eye, union and non-union, and saying, hey, there's only one party in this province who wants to build the infrastructure that keeps you employed, that supports a pipeline that brings 15,000 construction jobs to this province, and that's the BC Liberal Party. And I think that that will resonate. Look, we can talk about cost of living and affordability all you want. The best way to make life more affordable is good paying jobs, and I think that's a powerful message that he can work on. It also fits into their whole rebranding around this idea that BC's a place of opportunity. The BC Liberals are the party of that opportunity. So I think there's some stuff there. The Greens, Andrew Weaver. I heard a little birdie told me that internal polling done for a major political party in this province shows that the Greens and the NDP are in a virtual dead heat on Vancouver Island, provincially. That's probably why we're not in an election campaign right now, Maclean. And the Liberals have their little 1 or 2 seat chances there, but generally it's the Greens and the NDP virtually tied on the island. So the question there is, can they capitalize on some of this federal momentum, and can they use this to fundraise provincially and replace some of the money they're not going to get from people concerned or wanting to see prop rep like last year?
Well, yes is a short answer to that. We talked about how the yesterday's decision was kind of a net neutral for Andrew Scheer. I think for Andrew Weaver, it's almost a net neutral, but it's like probably more of an opportunity. I mean, the opportunity is almost a negative one in that some of the people who voted NDP and were opposed to the pipeline and were told that they would stop the pipeline may now sort of look towards the Greens as sort of being the more, I guess, I don't know what the word is, authentic on that file. Because the NDP would be, as they themselves admitted yesterday, tried everything they could legally to stop this, and so far, and probably will continue to fail. So if you feel strongly about this issue, what's the appeal for continuing to vote NDP? That said, Weaver has propped up this NDP government, and it's not clear what more he would have done. So that's why I say this is probably sort of a slight positive, but more closely a neutral for Andrew Weaver. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's slightly to the positive side. It gives them something to fundraise on, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Okay, Maclean, I've been reading the Orca, some great stuff on there. I want to talk about Daniel Marshall's piece, but I also want to talk about your piece on the speakers. So what do you want to do first, you or Dan?
Let's lead with Dan, since we ran him on the weekend. Daniel Marshall is our very own sort of Indiana Jones, Dan Brown figure. No other man in British Columbia gets handed a piece of garbage from a souk parking lot and then turns it into, archaeological sleuthing with the curator of the Royal BC Museum. It's, the man is Tom Hanks in the Da Vinci Code. And the best part about Dan is not just that this happened to him, and then he wrote a great story about it, is that these kinds of things happen to Dan. This wasn't terribly unusual.
Yeah. No, exactly. Okay, so, I love this story. Basically, a buddy of his finds a red rock in a parking lot that looks like it's been carved.
Takes it from a seagull.
Takes it from a seagull, right. So some bird has flown it here, apparently from the interior, if I'm reading Daniel's hypothesis correctly. It turns out to be an ancient arrowhead made from material that isn't available anywhere on Vancouver Island. And what I love is, like you're right, he's like Indiana Jones. Like, suddenly he's like in the archives of the Royal BC Museum, and they're like, "Come on in, Daniel. Let's go through all this other stuff." And they're like hunting it up. It's unbelievable what he can do, and I'm just glad he's on our side. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, absolutely. Let's make sure that we keep his talents focused only on good. And eventually, when we make the Orca movie, he's going to be the one with the Tom Hanks role where he gets to say things like, "We have to get to a library. There's no time." That's right.
Everyone will love him the best. Okay, and then I loved your piece on the Speaker's office. So you interviewed 3 speakers, 2 former, one Peter Milliken, widely regarded as maybe the best speaker in Canadian history. A couple of others, including a current one. And you asked, hey, what would you do if a staff person called the leader of the opposition a bad name or got into some partisan scraps? And a very different response than what we're seeing here in British Columbia.
Well, I mean, the response was clear that there's just simply that would never happen under their watch. It's just not something. It's a situation that would be avoided at all costs. Now, I mean, it's worth it. The 3 speakers I spoke to rather. Peter Milliken was a federal Liberal. Was the speaker for 3 different prime ministers in minority parliaments. John Reynolds was Reform and Canadian Alliance and SOCRED here in BC when he was speaker, and then Nathan Cooper is from Alberta. Is Canada's newest speaker. He's been on the job since May. So we're talking about people with very different perspectives and ideological leanings. And they were all very careful to avoid comment on things like the ongoing investigation. But all simply to say that the role of the speaker has to stay nonpartisan. And the idea of one of their staff getting into a war of words with any elected official, much less the leader of the opposition, was just so completely beyond the pale for any of them.
Yeah, what I found fascinating, though, is you interviewed Alan Mullen, who is obviously embroiled in this, and Mullen didn't backtrack. He doubled down. Usually you kind of soften. A few days go by, and you kind of go, sober second thought. And, maybe heat of the moment, and everyone would have said, "Wow, who can blame you? They were, filing all these points of privilege and whatnot. Oh, we understand." But instead, no, he was just as feisty as ever. This is clearly a burr under his saddle. Something he does not like Andrew Wilkinson or the BC Liberal Party.
Yeah, no, he meant what he said. He stood by them, and he was happy to defend it. And as he pointed out, this is in his job description, not getting into a war of words with Andrew Wilkinson or the leader or any elected member, but to, he said, give interviews, make statements, and generally be the public face of the Speaker's office. But I mean, I doubt very much that his job description includes, calling the leader of the opposition's behavior a disgrace. It's an unusual situation we're in BC, but we're getting used to that, aren't we?
Yeah, we really are. And I don't know, like the public face of the Speaker's office. The Speaker's office is supposed to be the public face of every member of the legislature. He works for every member of the legislature, not just one particular party or one particular point of view. So, yeah, this is a bit muddy. And it was interesting to read Milken kind of flat out saying, that a person who engaged in that and under his watch would not have been employed for long. But
yes, it would have been a firing offense. So it's
Plecas
again
land,
BC.
different standard.
Yeah.
All right. Jody Vance has a great piece today on her experience with her father entering or the kind of the early stages of Alzheimer's. This is something that really resonates with a lot of people across BC, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a sandwich generation of people that were raised by baby boomers. And as the baby boomers age, there's going to be increasing numbers of them dealing with things, sadly, like Alzheimer's and early onset dementia. As Jody points out, it's more than, I think it was 419,000 Canadians have been diagnosed with some form of dementia, which is staggering. And for the people who have to sort of pick up the pieces and take care of their loved ones, I mean, it can be overwhelming, mostly because we still don't actually talk about this a lot. And so, I mean, without spoiling the piece, I encourage you to read it. It's a tough one. I mean, this is a personal one for Jody. This is something she's going through right now with her dad. And so I would encourage you to read it. It's not an easy read, but I mean, it's beautifully written and it's very personal.
I remember 12 or 15 years ago, Gordon Campbell, as premier, talking a lot about, was it the silver tsunami or like the wave of aging boomers and what it would mean to the healthcare system. I know that there has been work done in healthcare to try to prepare for this, but man, the numbers are just so overwhelming. I'm not sure you could do. I'm just not sure you could ever be prepared enough and have the kind of infrastructure necessary to take care of all these people. It really does fall a lot on their children to advocate for them and to make sure that they're taken care of. So, yeah, one of those sad stories that you'd rather not talk about, but we need to start talking about as a society if we're going to make it through this.
But oh, so necessary to talk about. And from a deeply personal and touching story to a very different kind of story, the return of Jordan Bateman to song on the Orca this week. Got a lot of attention.
It did get a lot of attention. It had something like 2,500 likes on the ICBA Facebook page. I wrote "'Twas the Night Before TransMountain," which somehow morphed into Jason Kenney giving sort of a Santa Claus figure, a stern Santa figure, giving young Justin Trudeau a talking to. I don't know. My favorite line is like, and Sophie in her night, or in Sophie and whatever, and I in my cap had just settled in for a long summer's now. I don't know. It was kind of funny, but. One of those little things that certainly caught fire. On ICBA's Facebook page, I paired it with the picture of Justin Trudeau sticking his hand out to Jason Kenney and Kenney looking disdainfully down, which may have been the perfect pairing, much like it was the perfect wine to go with that cheese, let me say that. So there you go. That certainly caught fire. The Albertans loved it. And I have reports that Premier Kenney himself read it and chuckled. So there you go. High praise.
Money to see that.
I give it 5 chuckles, said Jason Kenney. No, just kidding. All right. That's it for us. Maclean, you are off next week, so no Finn, no hot stove. What am I going to do with myself all week?
You'd probably be productive.
That's true. Fair enough. Yeah, it's possible. It's plausible.
Yeah. You'll have to go back. You have to give all your attention to your day job, and
yes, exactly.
Just for 1 week.
Not my burgeoning career as a mediocre podcaster. I will carry on. What I'm really worried about, though, is like who's going to tell me what news is important? I'm going to have to rely on Norm Spector on Twitter to tell me what I need to read every morning. So.
Man, well, Norm's a good fill-in, I guess. And then, as we were saying earlier, the Finn when I get back on the Tuesday after Canada Day, that's going to be a novel.
Yes, that will be a major thing. So if all of you politicians out there could just do Maclean a favor and not make too much news next week, just he won't feel so bad about taking vacation. No, just kidding. Don't feel bad about taking vacation. You've earned it after that particular legislative session.
I'm going to sleep for most of this vacation. It's true.
We all deserve a vacation after putting up with that malarkey. All right, that's it for the Hot Stove. Catch George and Jody on Friday this week on the Unspun podcast, where no doubt George will unspin all of my spin on the on the TransMountain pipeline. He'll break that down, and who knows what other crazy things. You see in Burnaby, I just saw this come across. Like there's this. Someone going out there like loosening lug nuts in Burnaby, and now I got to check my van or car every time I get into it to make sure my lug nuts are loosened. Don't I have enough to worry about, Maclean? Then besides some lug nut loosener, I don't know. What a world!
Sounds like an awful euphemism.
Yeah, what a world we live in. Anyways, we'll be back in 2 weeks, and thanks for watching on the Hot Stove.
See you in 2 weeks.